Yo, what's up guys? Catmaster here with my Day 1 League diary. As many of you may know, we have been starting in a private league with just around 20 players. This is a group-found environment where we help each other out. There's no trade economy, but we can trade and party with each other. There's just no listing items for mirrors or stuff like that, and like actually demanding money, but it's just like if someone wants something, you hand it to them, and everyone generally helps each other out. Now, since League Start, I've played around 14 hours, and I've managed to put this character together, and in this video, I'd like to quickly go over this character and share my decision making and build process so that if you're following a similar build, maybe I can help you with some of the decision making and you can be inspired by the way that I put it together. Now, full disclaimer, of course, I'm using this path of building from I'm Exile from last league that I'm loosely basing the build on, and I have not yet completed speccing into the Undertaker cluster, which is super important because it scales the max life of the corpses that you spawn and allows you to spawn more corpses, as well as scaling the damage if you have consumed a corpse recently, so take that into account when you watch the footage. Now, the way that Detonate Dead as a build generally works is you summon corpses on the ground and then you explode them. So it's technically a 2-button build, and that's what scares a lot of people away from this, but most of the times you don't need 2 buttons, as there'll usually be corpses on the ground that you can detonate from the monsters that you kill, which won't be the highest damage output that you have, but it will be sufficient to clear the maps. Now, as I said, you spawn the corpses, you detonate, and on monsters that are a little bit more tanky, you throw out an Arcanist brand for double curse and the Flame Surge burning ground that scales off of the ignite on the enemies, which is pretty huge. Now, periodically you see me press this button to bring up a Malevolence Divine Blessing, which we pay for with our massive energy shield pool. That will give me a 10-second buff that provides more damage over time and skill effect duration. You probably also have noticed my Warcry going off periodically, which is automated via Call to Arms and grants endurance charges as well as a burst of life regeneration. For getting around quickly in the map, we have a shield charge faster attack setup, and for precise repositioning, we got a flame dash on top of this. Now, while some monsters can be extremely tough, Val Detonate Dead makes quick work of them if there's enough corpses around to keep the chain reaction going. And the best thing about this build is the incredible single target damage. While the clear is not the best, I can promise you that every map boss just melts like butter and doesn't even feel like a boss. Well, probably not this one, because this one has 5 phases, so I don't know why I selected this one for the video. But just to show you that it makes quick work of the boss's health bar, here we go. Now, I'll keep the remaining phases of the boss for later, while we go over our gear to let you know how this works. But before we go into the gear, quick overview of the gem setups. We're using Val Detonate Dead, linked with Ignite Proliferation and Unbound Ailments, as well as Cruelty, Burning Damage, and Swift Affliction. There are a number of gems in the PoE that you could be using instead, so you can make a number of color combinations work. You don't need these specific colors. I decided for 2 green because this is an armor energy shield base that I got my 6 link on, and I really didn't want to spend a whole lot of currency re-rolling the socket colors, so I settled for 2 green, 2 blue, 2 red. But you could easily accommodate 3 green or 3 blue, depending on what kind of base type you're using. Now, the second most important setup next to the Val DD setup is the Arcanist brand, which will cast Flammability and Elemental Weakness, apply both those curses, as well as cast Flame Surge, which itself cannot ignite, but causes hits on ignited enemies to create Burning Ground, which will then deal a percentage of the fire damage per second of the highest ignite affecting the enemy. So effectively scaling off of your main damage source, which are the ignites caused by your Detonate Dead main skill. We have a loose Desecrate in order to be able to spawn corpses, shield charge faster attacks to get around places, and we're running Haste, Determination, as well as Tempest Shield for speediness, armor, spell block, and shock immunity. In order to get around, we also have a loose Flame Dash, and as I mentioned, for a temporary Malevolence buff, we're using Divine Blessing together with the Malevolence Aura, which does have a huge cost that you can only pay by either not reserving any mana or using Eldritch Battery, which makes your energy shield protect your mana. As I mentioned, I also got Enduring Cry linked to Call to Arms, which turns it into a toggle that, while active, will trigger the supported Warcry as soon as it comes off cooldown. Now, Call to Arms comes with a reduced cooldown recovery rate modifier for the linked Warcry, which means that any increased cooldown recovery rate affecting your Warcry will be worth slightly more than it would have otherwise if you didn't have that reduction. It's the opposite of diminishing returns. Hence, I got one Warcry cooldown recovery rate tattoo that I found, and I plan on putting more into this build in the future to increase the frequency at which Enduring Cry goes off, because every Enduring Cry proc, which currently happens every 8.4 seconds, will regenerate a large amount of life and generate endurance charges based on the power of nearby monsters, as well as provide additional physical damage reduction and elemental resistances per endurance charge for a small buff duration of 2 seconds after it goes off. Now, a remnant from leveling that I haven't gotten rid of is Wave of Conviction Faster Casting that I can use to apply exposure for really tanky single targets. This is supposed to be replaced by a fire exposure on hit mod on the gloves that I've just not been able to obtain yet because I had to go to sleep and I have to record videos. So having explained the gem setup, I'll quickly go over my gear. We use a random 6 link that I got from one of the other guys in the private league, and I rolled some random stats on it. Really didn't care much about the explicits, just go and use the 6 link. Then we got boots with a relatively high movement speed modifier, and I was able to find Rimner's Resolve, which is really cool early on in the league, because not only does it give me a large amount of armor and a big damage increase to my fire damage, but also it comes with a 100% chance to avoid being chilled or frozen if you have used a fire skill recently, which Flame Dash and Detonate both are fire skills. So having used either of those in the past 4 seconds makes me completely immune to being chilled or frozen, which is a perfect temporary solution because in this build you're supposed to be getting the freeze immunity off of the augmented Soul of the Brine King, which I haven't augmented yet because Nasser, Lion of the Seas, is found in a reef map, which I haven't been able to get to yet. If you don't have access to this helmet and you find yourself frozen quite frequently, you could consider freeing up some reservations and using an Arctic Armor reservation for 25% base mana to gain immunity to freeze. I found quite a decent amulet with damage over time multiplier, increased armor, and some decent resists on a strength base. Sadly no life, but this will work for some time. My scepter is just a platinum scepter with fire damage over time multiplier and a tier 4 flat fire to spells and some increases to fire damage. If you're using Leap Slam, you'd be happy to get that attack speed, but since I'm using Shield Charge, which attacks with the shield, this local attack speed on my scepter doesn't do anything for my build. Now this is rather mediocre, I can make something better easily, but I acquired this from Necropolis crafting mechanic by doing the grave crafting in the Necropolis specific zone, and I was quite surprised to get this outcome on first try. Probably lucky, but we'll try more crafting later on. I'm also using a Thorium Spirit Shield with a large amount of life, some resistances, and a little bit increased spell damage, which was good while leveling, but now spell damage doesn't do anything for me because it doesn't apply to the ignite damage that we deal, only to a small portion of the hit, which comes from the gem-based damage and added damage from the scepter. I managed to get a Stygian Vise with a tier 1 life and some resistances, and I socket a Ghastly Eye, which gives me life and increased cast speed, and minion modifiers that don't do anything for me. I unveiled a power ring with plus minimum endurance charge, as well as a chance to gain endurance charge on kill, just as a supplement for my Enduring Cry, so that there's a higher likelihood of me being at full endurance charges most of the time. I also lucked out super hard and got an Amethyst ring with great life and decent mana and energy shield, as well as mana regeneration and an open suffix so I could craft the resist that I need. I'm massively overcapped for fire because currently I'm still using the Fire Mastery. I'm massively overcapped for fire, and for a while I was using the Fire Mastery that regenerates 1 life per second for each point of uncapped fire resistance. But since I got my Enduring Cry and an instant flask, I've gotten rid of it and invested the point elsewhere. For my utility flasks, I decided to use a sulfur flask, as well as a quicksilver with cast speed, a granite flask with increased armor. I would prefer not to have reduced duration on the prefix, but I don't have enough crafting materials and enough bases at the moment to roll a new one, as well as a quartz flask with phasing and global increased attack speed during effect, which helps increase the speed at which my shield charge goes off. For the tree, we pretty much stuck to the path of building, went out leveling with Armageddon Brand Cremation after getting to Act 3 with Rolling Magma and Holy Flame Totem, pathing through the spell damage, fire damage, elemental overload, over here to Holy Fire and the Reservation Cluster. As I said, in Act 3 we switched to Armageddon Brand Cremation for smooth sailing until maps, and then in maps, when I had my gear together, I did the transition to Detonate Dead. If you want more information on this, there's a very detailed path of building done by I'm Exile. I will link his path of building as well as his video guide in the description down below. Keep in mind it's from last league, so it does have stuff like Barkskin that you don't have access to this league, but for the most part there's been no changes, and this is excellent information to get you started. One important thing to note is that for maximum damage output you need to add high HP monsters to your Desecrate table. In this case we have meat sacks, which have been added. They were available as corpses from the vendor last league, but you couldn't add them to your Desecrate table, and now you can. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then watch my previously uploaded video on the new best corpses for Detonate Dead. I'll link it in the description down below. And while I'm at it, I'll also leave a link for my current POB, current state of the build, if you're interested in looking up how I did this thing, or if you care to open it to poke holes into it so you can leave sassy YouTube comments about how shit my build is. If you enjoy this type of video and would like to see more build diary updates about my progress in my private league, make sure you leave a like on the video and comment down below to let me know how your league start went and how you're currently finding 3.24 Necropolis League. Once again, if you have any questions or remarks, feel free to leave them down in the comments below as well. A massive thank you to the people who support my channel by renewing their Twitch subs, gifting Twitch subscriptions, renewing the YouTube memberships, or pledging on Patreon. We had some great episodes leading up to this league, and we got an upcoming episode on Monday night, 11 PM GMT, where we will be joined by Lighty and Big Ducks to talk all about the league start weekend and share tips and tricks as well as our findings so far in the league. I wish you a beautiful league start further, and I'll see you in the next video.